From London's giant Pyramid of Death that would have housed the remains of more than 5 million people, to a unique skyscraper that would be completely invisible from the ground. Or what about an insane canal megaproject that would have cut through the entire state of Florida? Hey, I'm your host Regis, and today we'll be taking a look at some of the most ambitious megaprojects that were never constructed. When we think of skyscrapers, we often picture towering structures that rise up for hundreds of meters. After all, that's literally their name, skyscrapers. When there's no more space left on the ground, the only logical place to continue building is up. But is that actually the case? What if there was another way? That's exactly what a group of Mexican architects and engineers envisioned back in 2010. A 300-meter skyscraper that, instead of scraping the sky, would instead be scraping down beneath the earth. This is the Earthscraper. This insane megaproject was planned to be built right in the historic center of Mexico City. More specifically, directly below the iconic Zócalo, which is home to the country's national palace as well as many other colonial-era landmarks. Because of its historic and cultural importance, there's actually a law that bans any building in the area from going over 8 stories in height. This makes it basically impossible to build any skyscrapers in the city center. So the architects behind this project thought, why not build down? The Earthscraper was envisioned as a 300-meter deep inverted pyramid that would plunge 65 floors below the ground. From the surface, the entire plaza would look almost exactly as it does today. The only change being that there would now be a reinforced glass floor embedded into the square. This allows natural light to make its way down the entire structure, while preserving the plaza on the surface. But with a depth of 300 meters, it's probably going to be really dark, especially on those bottom floors. From the inside, the Earthscraper looks surprisingly just like any other high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling glass panels as well as massive steel columns that line the walls on all sides. But once you look down, a vast open atrium stretches all the way down to the very bottom, which honestly sounds a bit terrifying considering that people could be living down on the bottom floors. But despite its promise of creating a unique skyscraper unlike anything we've ever seen before, the Earthscraper was ultimately never built. And honestly, it's not really that hard to see why. As bold and unique as the concept was, the engineering challenges were just too much for the project to be feasible. For one, digging more than 300 meters below what is quite literally the middle of the city is a massive logistical nightmare. The foundations of surrounding structures would have to be considered before any construction could even begin. There's also underground cables and pipes that all would have to be rerouted. And we haven't even begun talking about the potential historic artifacts that could be unearthed during the excavation. The whole of Mexico City is actually built on top of the capital of the ancient Aztec Empire. Preserving these ruins and artifacts could pose yet another hurdle that would make construction even more difficult. There's also the problem of earthquakes, which are pretty common as the city is located in a seismically active zone. The entire structure would have to be reinforced to withstand up to magnitude 8 or even 9 earthquakes. Today, even though the Earthscraper was never built, it still left behind an important idea. With cities getting bigger and more crowded, we're going to need bold and creative designs like this one to shape the future. Moving on to another ambitious pyramid that was never constructed, we have the Metropolitan Sepulchre. Unlike the Earthscraper, this pyramid is definitely not made for people to live in. In fact, it was actually designed as the final resting place for up to 5 million people. Back in the early 19th century, London's population was booming. Thanks largely to the Industrial Revolution, the city saw its population explode from around 1 million people at the start of the century to almost 6 million by 1890. And as the city continued to grow, so did disease and the overwhelming problem of finding a place to bury the dead. Cemeteries and burial grounds became so overcrowded and unsanitary that it actually became a serious threat to public health. Because of this, an architect by the name of Thomas Wilson came up with one of the most insane and radical proposals the city had ever seen. His idea was to solve London's burial crisis with a single monumental structure that would have been the tallest man-made structure in the world at the time. A giant death pyramid right in the middle of London. Different sources claim different things, but from what we've gathered, the structure would have been roughly 400 meters tall. The Death Pyramid was proposed to be built in a fairly central location, right on top of Primrose Hill. The structure itself would have been divided into thousands of burial compartments, which are stacked along the pyramid's inner walls. At the center, a grand staircase would spiral all the way to the top of the pyramid, where there will be an obelisk and an astronomical observatory. In theory, this one single structure would have been able to hold as many as 5 million bodies, a number that would have dramatically reduced the need for burial grounds in the city for many years to come. But as ambitious as Wilson's proposal was, the idea never made it past the drawing board. Even with today's construction materials and technology, building a structure as massive as the Death Pyramid would still prove to be an extremely difficult task. The megaproject would also have been super expensive to build. Estimates at the time put the cost of the entire construction at around £7 million. In today's money, that's actually more than $1 billion. And if you ask me, that's a little too much to pay for one cemetery. There were also pretty significant objections to the project, as the idea of a massive pyramid of death in the middle of the city proved to be just a bit too grim of a picture for most Londoners. Instead, London eventually solved their burial crisis with the creation of many new, smaller cemeteries around the city. Moving on from pyramids that were never meant to be, let's now head over to an ambitious bridge proposal that's been floating around for over a century. The idea of connecting Britain and France via a bridge over the English Channel is nothing new. In fact, the earliest known concept of a bridge between the two countries dates all the way back to 1889. This version of the Channel Bridge never got past the planning phase, primarily because of the cost. Constructing it back then would have cost 10 times more than just operating a system of ferries across the channel. In the 1980s, discussions surrounding a permanent link between the two countries resurfaced, and two of the many proposals submitted to the British government included some form of bridge over the English Channel. The first one was called Euroroute. Starting in Dover, a bridge would take motorists to an artificial island just 5 kilometers off the coast of Britain. From here, a 20-kilometer underground tunnel would then emerge to yet another island near the French coast. Finally, another bridge segment would continue to France for a total driving time of roughly 30 minutes. The second proposal was called Eurobridge. Unlike the previous plan, this proposal would consist of only one continuous bridge, constructed 70 meters above the water's surface. The bridge would have carried 12 lanes of traffic inside a suspended tube that would protect drivers from strong winds. However, both of these proposals never came to be. What would eventually become the Channel Tunnel, or the Chunnel that we know today, was the proposal that was ultimately chosen in the end. But why wasn't a bridge ever built? And why did they choose the Channel Tunnel over all those other proposals? Well, it all comes down to the English Channel itself. As the single busiest waterway in the whole world, any crossing within this narrow corridor would have had to have been high enough for massive cargo ships and tankers to safely pass underneath. Building a tall bridge is already challenging enough on its own, but building it across the busiest shipping route in the world is on a different level entirely. Ships would inevitably be delayed, and maritime traffic would severely be disrupted during the construction. And that's not even touching on the issue of weather. The English Channel is notorious for its rough winds, dense fog, and heavy storms, all of which makes the construction, maintenance, and daily use of a theoretical bridge even more difficult. On the other hand, an underground tunnel completely bypassed all of these challenges. A bridge between the United Kingdom and France could still be built today, as we're already capable of building even longer bridges. The Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, for example, stretches an incredible 55 kilometers across the Pearl River Delta, a length that is significantly longer than the narrowest point in the English Channel, only 34 kilometers. If a channel bridge were to be constructed today, it would easily become one of the most expensive and challenging bridge constructions the world has ever seen. but as of now, there are no plans of building it anytime soon. Hopping across the Atlantic, let's now head over to an alternate New York City, which could have looked completely different than it is today. This is Roosevelt Island, a narrow strip of land located between Manhattan and Queens. Today, it's a pretty quiet and unremarkable island that's mostly known for its scenic tramway views and riverside parks. But back in the early 1900s, this was probably a place that you wouldn't want to visit. It was home to an asylum, a smallpox hospital, a prison, and plenty of housing for the poor. Basically, the island was used as a place to isolate the city's most vulnerable and undesirable populations. But in 1904, a wildly ambitious proposal imagined a very different future for the island. A young architect by the name of Thomas J. George argued that New York's current city hall was located in a place that was too far removed from the actual heart of the city. Because of this, he envisioned Roosevelt Island, of all places, as a new civic center that would be more accessible and central than the current one, completely transforming the notorious island into a grand municipal complex. The centerpiece of his vision was a monumental neoclassical building that would have been 7 blocks long and 180 meters tall. The structure would be home to various courthouses, administrative and government offices, and of course, the City Hall. Surrounding this massive structure would be a mirrored promenade spanning the entire area. Probably the most interesting part of this design are the bridges that would directly connect the island to the rest of the city. George even planned for one of the bridges to pass right through the central dome of that main building. But despite these grand ambitions, the Roosevelt Island Civic Center was never built. Just 5 years after George published his plans, a bridge was in fact built in the area, but it was actually constructed over the island instead. In the decades that followed, Roosevelt Island remained an isolated place that nobody really wanted to visit. In fact, it wasn't until 1955 that the island finally got its first direct road connection to the rest of the city. If George's plans had actually been constructed, it would have dramatically reshaped New York City's urban landscape. The surrounding borough of Queens probably would have developed into a bustling urban area in the same way that Manhattan did. The planned bridges would have turned the island into a key crossroads between Manhattan and Queens, and Roosevelt Island itself probably would have become one of the most iconic spots in the entire city, forever defining New York's skyline in the same way that the Empire State Building or the Statue of Liberty has done for so many years. Finally, let's now shift our focus south to Florida with an ambitious megaproject that could have completely changed the geography and economy of the entire region. This is the Cross-Florida Barge Canal. The idea behind this megaproject was surprisingly straightforward. By cutting directly across the Floridian Peninsula, the canal would have created a shortcut for shipping between the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. The canal would begin on the Atlantic coast near Jacksonville and follow the St. Johns River all the way south to the city of Palatka. From here, a series of dams, canals, and natural waterways would eventually lead the route to the Gulf, near a town called Yankeetown. In total, the entire system would have spanned 180 kilometers across the entire state. The canal would have saved vessels as much as 3 days of travel time compared to going around the peninsula. It would also have increased the efficiency of trade routes, boosted Florida's economy, and transformed the state into an industrial and shipping hub. Interestingly, unlike all the other megaprojects in this video, the Cross-Florida Barge Canal actually began construction back in 1935.
It pleases me to report to the people of Florida and the nation that the long-sought Cross-Florida Barge Canal is now well underway.
Over the following decades, the project would be started, stopped, and restarted again multiple times, primarily because of environmental concerns. Giant swaths of land were cleared, and a few sections of the project even managed to finish construction. By the 1970s, opposition to the canal was starting to grow, as people started to realize just how much damage the canal would cause to the local environment. Conservation groups warned that the project would cause irreversible damage to the surrounding ecosystem. Finally, in 1990, when around 28% of the project had already been completed, Congress eventually deauthorized the entire thing, sealing the fate of the Florida Canal as a project that will likely never be completed. Today, all that's left of this ambitious plan are a few scattered remnants. Partially dug channels, old bridges, crumbling support pillars, and abandoned locks and dams can be found along the canal's route. But the story of this megaproject doesn't end here. With the canal project already abandoned, the state of Florida eventually found a use for all of the land that was now sitting cleared and undeveloped. Just a year after cancellation, the canal corridor was reborn as the Marjorie Harris Carr Cross Florida Greenway. Geez, that is a mouthful. Wow. The project was named in honor of the environmental activist who was instrumental in the opposition towards the canal project. Today, this 180-kilometer greenway hosts various trails, parks, campgrounds, and recreation areas all along the route of the old canal. What began as a stalled megaproject has now become one of Florida's largest recreational greenways. But what do you think of these megaprojects? Could any of them ever actually be built in the future? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.